these archaic, prehistoric instincts could actually be your greatest obstacle, and that fear is the kryptonite of transformation. Organizations where employees lack trust in their leaders are 57% more likely to experience failed change initiatives. Redefining control during change isn't about abandoning authority. It's about shifting from command and control. Guardrails provide structure without restricting creativity. Think of them as the lane markers on a highway. They guide vehicles without dictating their speed or driving style. Similarly, during change, guardrails help teams stay aligned while giving them room to innovate. Remember, transformation doesn't happen because of control. It happens because of connection. Hi guys, welcome to yet another episode of Future Fit with Friska. And today we are going to talk about the C word. No, it's not COVID, that's been and gone. It's not connection, it's actually control. We're going to be discussing the paradox of control in organizational change and transformation. You see, control and power are cornerstones of leadership. And for many leaders, they represent competence, authority, and success, especially in times of change. But what if I told you that these archaic, prehistoric instincts for control and power, which feel so natural and necessary, could actually be your greatest obstacle during your organization's transformation? This is the heart of the paradox. You see, during periods of change, the more tightly leaders try to control every single aspect, the more they inadvertently create resistance. They stifle innovation, and they can slow down progress. On the surface, control seems like the best way to ensure everything goes smoothly. But in reality, it can unravel the very fabric of collaboration, trust, and the creativity that change requires. So today's episode is about shifting that perspective. We'll explore the role of control and power in the context of organizational change and transformation. I'll share some research and stories that illustrate why loosening your death grip is sometimes the most powerful decision you can make. We'll dive into a roadmap for redefining control, practical strategies for letting go, and we'll end with some reflection questions and actionable first steps to get you started fast. So whether you're a leader steering your team through uncertain waters or simply curious about what it means to lead transformative change, stay tuned. This one is for you. So in moments of transformation, leaders often feel compelled to tighten their control, myself included. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's understandable. Change is inherently messy. People resist it. Mistakes will be made. Outcomes are uncertain. And we as leaders often believe that if we're not actively steering every decision and being involved in the nitty-gritty, we're not doing our jobs. But here's the truth. In organizational change, control can become a bottleneck. It fosters micromanagement, mistrust, and fear. And that fear is the kryptonite of transformation. It halts experimentation, it curbs innovation, and it prevents people from actually making meaning out of this change that's happening. Why does this matter? You see, there's something called cognitive load and change resistance. University of Cambridge research shows that during periods of change, employees are 40% more likely to resist when their leaders start micromanaging. And this study found that overly directive leadership increases that cognitive load of employees. And this means they have less bandwidth to problem solve or adapt to the change itself. There is a cost to this mistrust. So PwC said organizations where employees lack trust in their leaders are 57% more likely to experience failed change initiatives. That is a huge number. Trust is key, and excessive control erodes it. Let's examine now two contrasting examples, one where things failed and one where things succeeded, and control played a central role. Everybody knows Nokia. They're dead now, right? But they did dominate the mobile phone market in the early 2000s. However, as the smartphone era dawned, its leadership became increasingly rigid, controlling every aspect of the company's direction. Managers were not encouraged from challenging the status quo or proposing new ideas. And this top-down control stifled innovation and led to a huge missed opportunity. And at the same time, Apple and Samsung revolutionized the smartphone market. Nokia's reluctance to loosen this death grip resulted in eventually the demise of the company. Now here's a success story. Patagonia, you may know, B Corp. In contrast, their leadership demonstrated how relinquishing control can yield amazing results. There was a pivotal transformation in their supply chain, and Patagonia's leadership empowered their teams to take ownership of sustainability issues. Their people were trusted to identify solutions and collaborate across the organization. By focusing on guiding principles rather than micromanaging, they not only achieved industry-leading sustainability practices, but deepened employee engagement and customer loyalty. Why do you think this paradox persists? The paradox of control exists because leaders equate power with certainty. But certainty is an optical illusion, especially during transformation. Change is unpredictable. There are many variables beyond any one person's control. The need for control often stems from fear of failure, fear of looking incompetent, fear of losing influence. So the key to navigating this paradox is reframing control as empowerment. Instead of being the person who dictates every move, you become the person who creates the conditions to success. What follows next is a 5-step guide, a roadmap to redefining control in organizational change. Too much of it suffocates. Creativity lacks. It disempowers teams and it slows innovation. But too little control, you get chaos. So as a leader, finding that right balance between guiding your organization through turbulent times and empowering your people is an art and a necessity. Redefining control during change isn't about abandoning authority. It's about shifting from command and control to a mindset that fosters trust, accountability, and adaptability. So this roadmap outlines 5 actionable steps to help with you to redefine your relationship with control. I'll also include within each step a probing question, examples of success or failure, and those first initial baby steps to guide you to implementing these ideas in your organization. So let's start with step 1, reassessing what control really means. At this stage, you should be asking yourself, am I focused on driving outcomes or micromanaging processes? Start by defining your non-negotiables. What are the core outcomes or values you must protect during change? Then let go of how everything else gets done. A Harvard Business Review found that leaders who focused on outcomes rather than methods were 45% more likely to lead successful change. So control doesn't mean managing every single detail. It means setting a clear direction and empowering your team to find innovative ways to get there. The best leaders focus on the what and the why, while allowing their teams to determine the how. Here's a great example. Netflix has a culture of freedom and responsibility. They made a decision to eliminate fixed working hours and vacation policies as a case in point. They focused on outcomes, and that is quality content creation, not the mechanics of how their people spend their time. Their success lies in their ability to give their employees freedom within a strong framework. They eliminated policies around expenses, holidays, approvals, and leaders at Netflix really trusted their people to act in the company's best interests. The result? A highly innovative culture that thrives under change. So what would be the first steps for you to take if you wanted to follow in their footsteps? I'd suggest clarifying outcomes. Write down the specific results you want to achieve. So for example, during a change and transformation project, it could be reducing cost by 10% or increasing customer satisfaction ratings rather than dictating individual tasks. Then empower teams. Identify areas where you can step back. Trust your team to come up with creative solutions and hold them accountable for results, not processes. And then evaluate yourself. Reflect on when you're overstepping the mark. Are you making decisions out of fear or a lack of trust? We now move on to step 2. And step 2 is about building a culture of trust and autonomy. You should be asking yourself, do my team members feel empowered to make decisions without constantly seeking my approval? If the answer is no, then these are your baby steps towards making that a yes. Build trust by involving employees early in the change process. Share information transparently and ask for their input. Think of autonomy like a boomerang. When you throw it out with trust, it circles back with commitment and the results. This is the foundation of high-performing teams. Right? HBR research shows employees in high-trust organizations report 74% less stress, 50% higher productivity, and 76% more engagement than those in low-trust environments. Here's a real-life example of a high-trust team. Lego's rebirth through employee empowerment. You may not know, they were on the verge of bankruptcy in the early 2000s. They were pretty much nearly irrelevant, and leadership could not control their way to survival. Instead, they flipped. They trusted their people to innovate and take ownership of their ideas. This led to revolutionary product lines like Lego Mindstorms and collaborations with major blockbuster movies, which helped revive the company. So they trusted their people to lead innovation initiatives, and this resulted in a remarkable turnaround. So if this rings a bell for you, the first step is to delegate decisions. Choose one decision, just one to start, to leave entirely to your team, whether it's selecting a project approach or managing the budget. You need to start being transparent, so sharing the why behind decisions and trusting your team to find the best how. And lastly, you want to start celebrating autonomy. Publicly praise team members for taking initiative, even if some mistakes are made. We now move on to the third step, and this is about setting guardrails, not handing out handcuffs. Question here would be, are the boundaries I've set clear, and do they encourage freedom, or do they stifle it? If this rings a bell, then the first steps would be to establish clear boundaries and principles to guide your team. But within those boundaries, give them some wriggle room, some freedom to experiment and adapt. Spotify, right? What would we do without them? So they have something called a squad model, and that's a great illustration of how each team operates with really high autonomy, but aligns with the company's overarching goals. This balance of freedom and focus has fueled their success in the streaming industry, right? There is no number two. Guardrails provide structure without restricting creativity. Think of them as the lane markers on a highway. They guide vehicles without dictating their speed or driving style. Similarly, during change, guardrails help teams stay aligned while giving them room to innovate. Their use of squads allows their people to work independently while adhering to company-wide goals.
Are you leading change but constantly running into a brick wall of resistance? Maybe you've huffed and puffed, yet still not blown the house down. You are not alone. Resistance to change is one of the biggest roadblocks that leaders face, but it doesn't have to be. Imagine turning that resistance into momentum which drives you forward. That's exactly what my free 5-part mini course will help you do. It's called Shifting Resistance into Resilience, and in just 5 lessons, I'll walk you through proven strategies to break down those walls. You'll learn how to identify the root causes of resistance, engage your key stakeholders, yes, even the stubborn and loud ones, and build a culture that doesn't fatigue with change. It actually feasts on it. Sound good? All you need to do is click the link to get started, and the first lesson will be in your inbox. Don't let resistance render you powerless. Turn it into resilience that will push you forward.
So, if you want to start doing something similar, the first steps you need to make are to define those boundaries. So identify those areas that need non-negotiable, clear rules, like maybe compliance or safety, and where flexibility can thrive. You then need to align on objectives, so ensure teams understand the overall vision and how their work fits into it. And lastly, evaluate effectiveness. So review those guardrails regularly to ensure that they're enabling, not constraining, the innovation that you're after. We then move on to step number 4, and this is about embracing vulnerability and letting go. A question: am I willing to admit I don't have all the right answers? And really find your truth in this. If the answer is no, you need to start modeling vulnerability by admitting what you don't know and inviting collaboration, not criticism. Say things like, I don't have all the answers. What do you think? Brene Brown's talk on vulnerability didn't just go viral because she's a great speaker and has a wicked sense of humor. Her research really hit home for a lot of people. She showed that without a doubt that vulnerability is a key driver of trust and innovation and leadership. Pixar, their leadership is brain trust meetings where everyone's feedback is valued. This culture of vulnerability has been pivotal to their creative success and dominance in the movie industry. Letting go of control requires vulnerability. You can't have one without the other. A willingness to admit you don't have all these solutions. This builds trust and creates a culture where teams feel safe to risk, to innovate, and to learn. Another famous example would be Howard Schultz at Starbucks. So he was ousted and then returned to Starbucks as CEO in 2008, and he openly admitted he'd lost his way. The company had lost his way. This inspired trust and allowed the organization to confront some tough truths. By empowering his people and involving them in the turnaround, they were able to make such a strong comeback and regain its market position. So if vulnerability isn't something that comes naturally to you, here's some initial baby steps. The first, share a story of a time that you failed and what you learned from it. This happens to everybody, no matter where they've come from, what country they're in, or what they do for a living. So find those stories. The second would be create a safe space for teams to take calculated risks and learn from them. So encourage experimentation. And last but not least, listen actively. Being open to feedback makes it clear that you value the input of others. We then move on to the final step of this 5-step roadmap, and that is to measure success differently. A question you should be asking yourself in this step would be, am I evaluating my team based on the right metrics, or am I still focused on outdated measures of control and success? You need to shift from outcome-based metrics to learning-based ones. Celebrate progress, adaptability, and the lessons learned, not just the results. Leaders who redefine control must also redefine success. They're two sides of the same coin. So focus on not hours worked or rigid adherence to procedures. Measuring success based on meaningful results creates accountability and innovation. So here's another real-life example. Adobe made a big decision to scrap annual performance reviews in favor of continuous feedback sessions. This improved employee engagement by 30% and it reduced turnover. Atlassian has their famous Ship It Days. They're an Australian software company. So on their Ship It Days, employees work on any project they want that they're passionate about for 24 hours. Success isn't measured by completion, but by creativity and alignment with company goals. And this has led to significant innovations. So if this is you want to start redefining success, the first initial steps would be look at your old metrics and replace them. Replace them with those metrics that reflect progress toward your goals. So for example, moving from simply hours logged to customer satisfaction or revenue growth. Celebrate results. Publicly acknowledge outcomes that align with your organization's vision. And of course, adapt over time. Metrics are not set and forget, so regularly review them to ensure that they're driving the right behaviors and the right mindsets. As you start to redefine what control means for you as a leader, you may want to hold some of these questions in your mind. Where am I holding on too tightly to control in my organization? And how is it impacting my people? What small decision or responsibility could I delegate to empower my team today? How am I defining success during this period of change? And are my metrics aligned with the outcomes that I want? Redefining control in leadership isn't about abandoning structure altogether. It's about creating an environment where your team can thrive. By letting go of micromanagement and embracing trust, guardrails, and meaningful metrics, you can drive transformation and foster that culture that isn't afraid to experiment. It may feel risky to relinquish control, but as history shows, Organizations that thrive in times of disruption are those led by individuals who have been willing to adapt, who empower, and who inspire. You don't have to navigate this journey alone. Experts in change and transformation can guide you in redefining control for lasting success, even amid disruption and change. So, as we near the end of the episode, I want to share a personal story about how my letting go enabled me and the team to grow. A few years ago, I was leading a major change initiative for a global company, undergoing a complete operational overhaul. It was one of those once-in-a-decade projects, huge in scope, tight in timelines. Everyone's eyes were on me to deliver this massive step change in behavior. So naturally, I felt significant pressure, control, and know every aspect of the transformation. After all, isn't that what good leadership is about? Keeping your hands on the wheel, ensuring everything runs like clockwork. But as the project progressed, I noticed the more I wanted to manage or oversee to the nth level of detail, the slower things move. And so my team began to withdraw, deferring decisions they were perfectly capable of making on their own. Meetings became clogged with unnecessary approvals and second guessing. And it wasn't until a trusted colleague pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I really think that you're not trusting your team," that I had my light bulb moment. So here's 3 personal lessons I took away from this experience. The first is control creates bottlenecks. I was stifling the very people I'd hired for their expertise. So by trying to control everything, I was robbing them of the ownership and autonomy they needed to thrive. It was like planting a garden, but hovering so much over the plants that I was blocking the sun. So I made a decision to step back and I started delegating more, providing them the end destination and letting them decide on how we could get there. And here's the thing. When I did start letting go bit by bit, things didn't fall apart. They flourished. Their energy returned, decisions were faster, fresh ideas began flowing again. So by the end of the project, not only did we meet our goals, we also came within budget. So letting go gave me back 5 times the results I'd hoped for. The second lesson, trust is a force multiplier. One of the hardest parts of leadership is realizing that the magic happens when you're not in the room. I saw this firsthand when I allowed one of my juniors to pitch a strategy to one of the functional leadership teams. It was something I could have done myself, but I wanted them to have the experience. There were some hiccups for sure, but it was a huge leap forward for their personal development. It helped them improve and become more confident. And that ripple effect motivated others to step up and take the initiative. So trust isn't just something you give, it's something that transforms the team dynamic. And last but not least, lesson 3, letting go means letting others shine. There's a quote by Lao Tzu that I think about often. When the best leader's work is done, the people say, "We did it ourselves." And that's what leadership is really about. It's not about being the star of the show. It's about creating the environment where others can succeed. Letting go of control allowed me to focus on the bigger picture, like aligning the strategy with long-term goals, managing stakeholder relationships, while my team handled the execution. What I learned from that experience that shaped how I lead today and how I guide my clients' internal project teams, especially in the context of organizational transformation. So as leaders, we're often tempted to cling tightly to control because it feels safe, it feels good, it feels familiar. But true transformation requires letting go, not just of tasks, but of ego, of fear, of the belief that we have to do it all ourselves. When we let go, we create space for ourselves and for others to step in and thrive. And the results are far more impactful than anything we could have done alone. So ask yourself, what's one thing I'm holding on to right now that I could delegate or trust someone else with? What could I gain by letting go? You may just find that when you loosen your grip, everything falls into place. So here is my challenge for you. In the next week, I want you to identify one area where you can release control. Maybe it's delegating a decision. Maybe it's loosening a process or asking your team for input on a top initiative. So start small, experiment big, and see what happens. As always, if you need guidance or want to dive deeper into leading transformative change, do reach out. Remember, transformation doesn't happen because of control. It happens because of connection. So let me know how it goes, and until next time, stay future fit.